The entire history of ancient Egypt in under 25 minutes. Please remember to like and subscribe, it really does help us grow the channel. Introduction. Imagine a world where stone monuments touch the sky, where gods walk alongside kings, and where the Nile River is the lifeblood of an empire. This was ancient Egypt, one of the most powerful and enduring civilizations in human history. For more than 3,000 years, Egypt thrived. Pharaohs commanded armies, built monuments that defied time, and ruled a society whose culture, religion, and innovations still shape our world today. From the very first unification of the Nile Valley to the fall of Cleopatra, Egypt rose and fell, only to leave behind a legacy so powerful that it continues to inspire awe and mystery. This is not just the story of pyramids and mummies, it's the story of ordinary farmers along the Nile, daring queens, ambitious pharaohs, invading empires, and timeless ideas that spread far beyond Egypt's borders. In the next 25 minutes, we'll journey through the entire history of ancient Egypt, from its very beginning to its final days under Rome, exploring how this remarkable civilization changed the world forever. Chapter 1: The Early Dynasties. Our journey begins around 3100 BCE, when the scattered kingdoms of the Nile Valley were united under a single ruler, King Narmer, also known as Menes. This moment marked the birth of one of the most enduring civilizations in history. Narmer's unification of Upper and Lower Egypt was more than political, it was symbolic. On the famous Narmer palette, we see him wearing both the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt, representing his control over the two lands. This image became the foundation of Egyptian kingship for millennia to come. Narmer established Memphis as Egypt's first capital, strategically placed at the meeting point of Upper and Lower Egypt. From here, he and his successors could control trade routes, the fertile farmland of the Nile Delta, and the wealth of the south. This early period also saw the development of hieroglyphic writing, a system of pictures and symbols that allowed Egyptians to record history, religious beliefs, and government decrees. Hieroglyphs weren't just words, they were a sacred script, believed to have been given by the god Thoth himself. Pharaohs of the first and second dynasties consolidated power, organized labor, and began experimenting with monumental architecture. Early mastaba tombs, the precursors to pyramids, showed the Egyptian obsession with death and the afterlife even at this early stage. But above all, what defined this era was the creation of a centralized government, a pharaoh who was not just a king, but a divine figure, the earthly embodiment of Horus, the falcon god. From the very beginning, the idea of Egypt was inseparable from the belief that the pharaoh was chosen by the gods to maintain Maut, the balance of order and harmony. Chapter 2: The Old Kingdom, Age of Pyramids. With Egypt unified under powerful kings, the Old Kingdom, lasting from around 2686 to 2181 BCE, marked one of the most iconic and awe-inspiring chapters in Egyptian history. This was the age of the pyramids, when Egypt's rulers, later known as pharaohs, began building monuments on a scale the world had never seen before. The most famous of all is, of course, the Great Pyramid of Giza, constructed for Pharaoh Khufu around 4,500 years ago. Standing over 480 feet tall, it remained the tallest human-made structure on Earth for nearly 4,000 years. But the Old Kingdom wasn't just about stone and size, it was about power and belief. Pharaohs were considered living gods on earth, and the pyramids were not simply tombs, but colossal stairways to the heavens. They embodied the Egyptian obsession with the afterlife, ensuring that the king's soul, his ka, could live on forever. The Old Kingdom also saw the establishment of a highly organized bureaucracy. Egypt developed a sophisticated system of officials, tax collectors, and scribes who managed everything from grain storage to massive building projects. This efficiency allowed the pharaohs to mobilize tens of thousands of workers, engineers, and craftsmen to create their monumental legacies. But pyramid building wasn't just about royal vanity. These projects provided employment, stability, and unity. Workers were not slaves, as often imagined, but largely Egyptian farmers who labored during the Nile's flood season when fields were underwater. Archaeological evidence shows they were well fed and housed in organized worker villages near the pyramid sites. Beyond the pyramids, Egyptian art, sculpture, and religious practices flourished. Temples and statues were created to honor the gods and reinforce the pharaoh's divine authority. The Old Kingdom established many of the traditions, hieroglyphic writing, religious rituals, and architectural styles that would define Egypt for millennia. Yet, beneath its golden age, cracks began to form. Building such colossal monuments placed a heavy burden on Egypt's economy, and the growing power of regional governors, known as nomarchs, slowly weakened the pharaoh's control. By the end of the Old Kingdom, famine, political division, and a breakdown of central authority brought this glorious age to a close. Chapter 3: The First Intermediate Period. As the Old Kingdom collapsed around 2181 BCE, Egypt entered what historians call the First Intermediate Period, a time of chaos, drought, and disunity. Without the strong central rule of the pharaohs, the carefully balanced system that had sustained Egypt fell apart. Local governors, the nomarchs, seized power in their own regions. Egypt was no longer a united kingdom but a patchwork of competing provinces. Adding to the turmoil was a devastating climate crisis. The Nile's annual floods, the lifeblood of Egypt, failed repeatedly. Crops withered, famine spread, and many Egyptians struggled to survive. Texts from this era, like the admonitions of Ipuwer, paint a bleak picture, the poor rising against the rich, violence in the streets, and hunger haunting the land. In the north, based in Heracleopolis, a line of kings claimed the throne of Egypt, while in the south, another dynasty rose in Thebes. For over a century, the two powers clashed, each seeking to restore order under their own rule. Though often seen as a dark age, this period also sparked cultural resilience. Local rulers commissioned their own tombs and temples, independent of the pharaoh, and regional art styles flourished. Ordinary Egyptians, for the first time, could access funerary texts like the coffin texts, previously reserved for kings and elites, showing a shift in spiritual belief. Eventually, it was the southern rulers of Thebes who prevailed. Around 2055 BCE, Pharaoh Mentuhotep II reunified Egypt, marking the dawn of the Middle Kingdom, and pulling the nation back from the brink of collapse. Chapter 4: The Middle Kingdom. After the turmoil of the First Intermediate Period, Egypt emerged stronger than before under the rule of the Middle Kingdom, beginning around circa 2055 BCE. This era is often called the Classical Age of Stability because it marked the reunification of Upper and Lower Egypt under powerful pharaohs, most notably Mentuhotep II. His decisive victories brought an end to decades of civil strife and restored order, setting the stage for nearly 4 centuries of political stability. The Middle Kingdom saw significant advances in administration and governance. Pharaohs worked closely with a growing bureaucracy to centralize power, streamline tax collection, and maintain public works. Unlike the Old Kingdom, where pyramid building dominated, Middle Kingdom rulers focused on projects that benefited ordinary Egyptians, including irrigation works, canals, and fortifications to protect Egypt's borders. Culturally, this period was a golden age of literature and art. Writers produced classic works, including wisdom literature, stories of adventure, and moral tales that are still studied today. Art became more realistic and detailed, showing individuals in everyday life, rather than the rigid, idealized forms of the Old Kingdom. Economically, the Middle Kingdom expanded trade beyond Egypt's traditional borders. Expeditions reached Nubia, the Red Sea, and even parts of the Levant, bringing back gold, incense, exotic animals, and precious stones. This wealth fueled construction projects and helped support Egypt's growing population. The pharaohs of the Middle Kingdom also strengthened Egypt's military presence. Standing armies were organized, forts were built along strategic points, and border security became a priority. This shift reflected a recognition that Egypt's prosperity depended not only on internal stability but also on the ability to defend its territories and trade routes. In summary, the Middle Kingdom was a period of reunification, cultural flourishing, and economic growth. It laid the foundations for Egypt's later power during the New Kingdom, proving that even after chaos, Egypt could rise to unparalleled strength and creativity. Chapter 5, The New Kingdom, Empire of Glory. The New Kingdom, beginning around circa 1550 BCE, represents the height of ancient Egypt's power, wealth, and international influence. Following the instability of the Second Intermediate Period, Egypt emerged stronger than ever under the leadership of dynamic pharaohs who sought not just to rule Egypt, but to extend its reach far beyond the Nile Valley. This era saw the rise of iconic rulers such as Hatshepsut, Thutmose III, Amenhotep III, Akhenaten, and Ramesses II. Hatshepsut, one of Egypt's few female pharaohs, expanded trade networks, commissioned grand architectural projects, and maintained peace through diplomacy. Thutmose III, often called the Napoleon of Egypt, led successful military campaigns into Syria, Nubia, and the Levant, turning Egypt into a true empire. The New Kingdom is famed for its monumental architecture. Temples like Karnak and Luxor, and the stunning mortuary temple of Hatshepsut at Deir el-Bahari, showcased Egypt's religious devotion, artistic skill, and architectural innovation. This was also the age of Tutankhamun, whose nearly intact tomb discovered in modern times revealed the wealth, artistry, and religious beliefs of this period. Religion evolved during the New Kingdom, reaching new levels of prominence and complexity. Pharaohs were seen as divine intermediaries, responsible for maintaining Maut, the cosmic order, and ensuring prosperity. Akhenaten's brief religious revolution, centered on the worship of Aten, illustrates the bold spiritual experimentation of this period, even if it was eventually reversed. Economically, the new kingdom thrived on trade, agriculture, and tribute from conquered lands. Gold, timber, ivory, and exotic animals flowed into Egypt, enriching the pharaohs and supporting monumental construction. The period also saw advances in military technology, such as chariots and composite bows, giving Egypt a decisive advantage in both defense and expansion. Culturally, art and literature flourished. Wall paintings and sculptures became more lifelike, capturing both grandeur and intimate details of daily life. Literature, hymns, and inscriptions celebrated the pharaoh's achievements and conveyed moral and religious teachings. In essence, the new kingdom was Egypt's empire of glory, a time when pharaohs extended Egypt's borders, built awe-inspiring monuments, and left a cultural legacy that continues to captivate the world. It represents the pinnacle of ancient Egyptian civilization, politically, militarily, and artistically, before the slow decline that would follow in later centuries. Chapter 6: Decline and Foreign Rule. After centuries of grandeur, Egypt began to experience decline following the end of the New Kingdom around circa 1070 BCE. Internal strife, weak pharaohs, and succession disputes gradually eroded the power that had allowed Egypt to dominate the ancient world. Economic difficulties, including decreased agricultural yields and disruptions in trade, further weakened the state. The Third Intermediate Period, circa 1070 to 664 BCE, saw Egypt divided between rival dynasties ruling Upper and Lower Egypt, while foreign powers began to exert influence over Egyptian affairs. This period of fragmentation left the country vulnerable to invasions and interference from external empires. By the Late Period, Egypt fell under the rule of several foreign powers. Libyans, Nubians, Assyrians, and Persians successively controlled Egyptian territory, each leaving their mark on the land's culture and administration. Despite these occupations, Egypt's rich traditions, temples, and monuments continued to flourish, demonstrating the resilience of its civilization. The famous conquest by Alexander the Great in 332 BC marked a turning point, as Egypt became part of the Hellenistic world under the Ptolemaic dynasty. Greek rulers blended Egyptian traditions with their own, preserving temples and religious practices while introducing new cultural elements. This period saw the rise of Alexandria as a center of learning, science, and commerce, a continuation of Egypt's influence, though under foreign control. Religion and culture remained central to Egyptian identity throughout these turbulent centuries. Temples continued to operate, and traditional rituals persisted, even as pharaohs were replaced by foreign kings. Art and architecture during this time reflect both continuity with the past and adaptation to new influences, creating a unique fusion of Egyptian and foreign styles. Ultimately, this period represents the twilight of independent ancient Egypt. While political power diminished and foreign rulers took control, the civilization's spiritual and cultural legacy endured. Even under occupation, Egypt remained a land of monumental temples, intricate art, and enduring traditions, a testament to a civilization that had dominated the ancient world for millennia. Chapter 7: Rome takes Egypt. By the 1st century BCE, Egypt had become a prized jewel in the Mediterranean world, both for its wealth and its strategic location. The Ptolemaic dynasty, descendants of Alexander the Great's generals, ruled the land, but internal conflicts and rivalries weakened the kingdom. The famous love affair and political alliance between Cleopatra VII and Julius Caesar, followed later by her alliance with Mark Antony, was an attempt to restore Egypt's independence and preserve its power. Despite Cleopatra's intelligence, political acumen, and efforts to strengthen Egypt, the kingdom could not withstand the growing might of Rome. The decisive moment came after the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, where Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus, defeated Mark Antony and Cleopatra. With their defeat and subsequent suicides, Egypt was formally annexed into the Roman Empire in 30 BCE. Under Roman rule, Egypt was transformed into Rome's breadbasket, supplying grain to feed the growing population of the empire. Its cities, like Alexandria, flourished as centers of trade, scholarship, and culture, but political power and sovereignty were firmly in Roman hands. Roman governors administered the territory, and traditional Egyptian pharaohs disappeared, marking the end of thousands of years of native rule. Culturally, Egypt under Rome retained much of its religious and artistic heritage. Temples continued to operate, and Egyptian traditions persisted alongside Greco-Roman influences. This blending of cultures ensured that while Egypt's political independence had ended, its identity and legacy continued to shape the Mediterranean world for centuries. In essence, Rome's conquest marked the final chapter of ancient Egypt as a sovereign civilization, but its monumental achievements, rich culture, and influence would echo through history long after its fall. Egypt's legacy is timeless: pyramids, mummies, hieroglyphs, medicine, and myths that inspired future civilizations. Even today, Egypt's monuments captivate millions, a reminder of a civilization that shaped human history. And that's the story of ancient Egypt in under 25 minutes. From Nama to Cleopatra, Egypt's story lives on. If you enjoyed this journey, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss more explorations into the mysteries of history.